My partner demanded our empire, he said. I want the name, the clients, everything except the debt. My advisor begged me to battle, I said. Give him everything at the signing. I handed it all over, he smiled, not knowing I'd already won until his banker called to ask why the entire loan was due immediately. The glass table between us was a frozen lake, and the document lying upon it was a crack threatening to swallow everything. Julian, my business partner, and the man I once considered a brother, had just placed it there with a flourish that was all his own. His smile, usually a weapon of dazzling persuasion, was tight, not reaching the cold, assassin look in his hazel eyes. It's over, Clara, he said, his voice smooth, practiced. This partnership has run its course. We're pulling in different directions. I'm proposing a clean break. For the good of the company. I didn't touch the paper. I let my gaze drift past him to the panoramic view of the city from our 40th floor. Office at vantage point. Consulting. The skyline was a testament to a decade of our work, of late nights and bold ideas. Now, it just looked like a collection of glass and steel traps. A clean break, I echoed, my voice barely a whisper in the expansive, overly designed room. The cleanest, Julian leaned forward, the scent of his expensive cologne sharp in the air. I'll take the firm, the Vantage Point brand, the client portfolio, the office lease, the staff, everything. You walk away with your reputation intact, free to pursue whatever it is you want to do next. He paused, letting the magnanimity of his offer hang. Naturally, the company's liabilities remain with the company. My responsibility, the debt, the $3 million expansion loan from Mercantile Trust, the one he'd championed, the one I'd reluctantly signed, the one that now sat on the books like a sleeping dragon. He thought it was a shackle he was generously leaving for himself, a minor trade-off for the crown jewels. He saw it as a manageable monthly payment, a trivial cost of doing business for a firm as profitable as Vantage Point. A strange, almost imperceptible calm settled over me. This was it. The final brazen move in the slow-motion coup he'd been engineering for months. Everything? I asked, meeting his eyes. Everything, he confirmed, a flicker of victorious light finally igniting in his gaze. He'd expected tears, arguments, pleas. My quietude was a puzzle, but one he was sure he'd already solved. He saw the fatigue from my father's long illness and passing. He saw the woman who had retreated, who had lost her fire. I need to think, I said, standing up, the leather chair sighing behind me. Of course, Julian said, standing as well, the picture of conciliatory grace. Take the weekend. But Clara, for both our sakes, let's not drag this out. A protracted legal war benefits no one but the lawyers. I walked out of his office, through the buzzing open-plan space where our employees, his employees now, in spirit if not yet on paper, avoided my eyes. The narrative had already been written, Julian. The dynamic visionary was finally cutting loose to dead weight. Clara, the cautious operator, had become an anchor. My phone buzzed in my pocket before I even reached the elevator. It was Martin, my financial controller, and the only person left in the building whose loyalty hadn't been auctioned off to Julian's charm.com. Clara? He just called an all-hands meeting for this afternoon. The rumor mill is saying it's about leadership consolidation. What's happening? Meet me at the usual place. Martin. Now, the usual place was a small, independent coffee shop 5 blocks from the office tower, a place with scratchy jazz and real ceramic mugs, the antithesis of Vantage Point's sterile, branded perfection. Martin was already there, 2 steaming mugs before him. His glasses slightly fogged. He was a man built of sharp angles and nervous energy. His integrity, both his greatest asset and a constant source of personal anxiety. He presented a buyout, I said without preamble, sliding into the booth. He gets Vantage Point, all of it. I get my freedom and a release from my personal guarantees. Martin's face, already pale, went ashen. He can't do that. That's theft. The client relationships, the proprietary systems, we built half of that? We have to fight this. I've been compiling notes, Clara, the expense reports from his last business development trip to Monaco. The discrepancies in the client billing he oversees. We can go to the board, we can… Martin, I interrupted gently. Prepare the paperwork. Give him exactly what he's asking for. He stared at me as if I'd spoken in a foreign tongue. The betrayal in his eyes was profound. A physical blow. He had stood by me through my father's illness, covering my work, fending off Julian's insinuations about my commitment. He had been my fortress, and now he thought I was surrendering without a shot. You're just giving up? His voice cracked. After everything, your father, he believed in Vantage Point. He believed in you. The mention of my father was a lance to a heart I thought had already calloused over. Arthur Vance had been a professor of economics, a man who believed in sustainable systems, in foundations that could weather storms. He'd been my first and most brutal critic and my greatest champion. His long battle with cancer had taken me away from Vantage Point at a critical time. A vacuum Julian had filled with ruthless efficiency. I am not giving up, I said, leaning forward, lowering my voice. I am giving him exactly what he thinks he wants. And I need you to trust me. Can you do that? Can you prepare the transfer documents? Act as my representative, and when it's done, resign from Vantage Point immediately? The confusion on his face deepened into wary calculation. Martin's mind was a ledger. He needed data. What aren't you telling me? I can't tell you here. Not yet. But I need to know you're with me. That when the time comes, you walk out of that office with me and don't look back. He searched my face for a long minute, looking for the grief-stricken defeat Julian saw, or the frantic panic he himself felt. He found neither. He found a deep, unsettling resolve. Slowly, he nodded. All right, Clara, I'll prepare the documents. But this feels like financial suicide. Sometimes, I said, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. You have to let the old building burn to clear the land for something new. 10 years earlier, Julian Thorne and I met in the relentless crucible of our MBA program. He was impossible to ignore, charismatic, brimming with grandiose ideas, a natural orator who could sell sand in the desert. I was his opposite, meticulous, analytical, obsessed with the how behind the what. We were paired on a project and discovered a potent alchemical synergy. Think bigger, Clara, he'd urge, waving a hand at my detailed spreadsheets. The numbers will follow the vision. The vision will collapse without the numbers. Julian, I'd retort, but I'd be smiling. We became Thorne and Vance Consulting after graduation, operating out of my aunt's dusty garage. I was the architect, designing the business plan, building the operational frameworks, the client onboarding processes, the delivery pipelines. Julian was the frontman, the deal maker, the face that launched 1,000 PowerPoint decks. He brought in the clients. I made sure they never wanted to leave. Our big break was a medium-sized tech firm struggling with scaling. Julian dazzled their executives with talk of disruptive potential and market domination. I sat with their beleaguered ops team and built them a scalable, efficient, and humane project management system. They thrived. That case study became our rocket fuel. We rebranded as Vantage Point, moved downtown, hired a team. The press loved Julian. The articles called him a maverick, thinker, a consulting prodigy. My role was often reduced to operational expert or longtime partner. For years, it didn't matter. The success was ours. The profit sharing was equal. We were building something, but the imbalance metastasized. Success became a drug for Julian, and he needed ever larger fixes. He insisted on the designer office space with the killer view, the company BMW, the lavish client retreats. Perception is reality, Clara. We have to look like we've already arrived. Then came the push for the Pacific Rim expansion. Julian had returned from a conference, buzzing about the untapped potential in Southeast Asia. He wanted to open a Singapore office, hire a team, go big. The numbers were speculative at best. The market analysis I commissioned showed saturation and fierce local competition. "You're being risk-averse," he'd accused, his charm turning brittle. "This is the next frontier. Are you going to manage our books into oblivion? Or are you going to help me build a legacy?" He wore me down. He leveraged our history, our friendship, the very trust that was our foundation. Reluctantly, fear a cold stone in my gut, I agreed. We took out the $3 million loan from Mercantile Trust. I signed the papers, my signature feeling like a betrayal of every principle my father had taught me. The expansion was a catastrophic failure. The market was impenetrable. The office was a money pit. Within 18 months, we were shutting it down, writing off millions. The dragon was awake, and it was hungry. Julian's narrative shifted instantly. In board meetings, his tone became subtly questioning when discussing the financial modeling that supported the expansion. He didn't blame me outright. He simply let the doubt hang in the air, a toxic mist. The loyalists in the company, those who enjoyed the perks of his largesse, began to look at me differently. Then my father's diagnosis, stage 4. I became a part-time executive, a full-time daughter. For 6 months, Vantage Point was Julian's alone. He used the time masterfully. He bonded with key clients, reshuffled teams to place his allies in critical roles, and began the quiet, secret negotiations to sell Vantage Point to a giant global firm. Kensington Partners, the deal would make him fantastically wealthy. My share as a minority partner being squeezed out would be a footnote. I returned after the funeral, hollowed out but clear-eyed. The company I co-created was a stranger. My authority was a polite fiction, and Julian was ready, with his ultimatum and his poisonous generosity, to make it official. While Julian was hosting boozy client dinners and secretly courting Kensington, I was in the quiet beige-walled haven of my father's home library, surrounded by his books on economic history and systems theory. Grief is a brutal clarifier. It strips away the non-essential. In that stillness, I saw Vantage Point for what it had become. A glittering shell. A brand built on Julian's ego, fundamentally unstable. I also saw the hunger in the market. Our clients, the ones who actually implemented our advice, were exhausted by disruption and pivots. They were terrified of volatile supply chains, of reputational risk from unethical partners, of the sheer fragility of their hyper-optimized, lean operations. They didn't need another visionary. They needed a mechanic, a builder, a keystone, with a portion of my father's inheritance, not a fortune, but meaningful seed capital. I began on a separate laptop using encrypted communication. I started drafting a new business model. I called it Aegis Operational Integrity. Aegis wouldn't be about top-line growth. It would be about resilience. It would offer stress-tested supply chain design, ethical audit frameworks, continuity planning, and deep-dive operational diagnostics. It was the unglamorous, essential plumbing of business. And it was everything I was good at. I didn't reach out to the CEOs on Julian's golfing list. I reached out to the people who answered my late night emails when we'd saved their projects. Sandra in logistics at Torrance Manufacturing, Ben in procurement at Evergreen Retail, Liam in systems at Codecraft. These were the people who felt the pain when Julian's big ideas met reality. The conversations were cathartic. They vented about vantage points increasing detachment, about strategies that looked great in boardrooms but caused chaos on the ground. Slowly, carefully, I shared the Aegis concept. I spoke their language of risk mitigation, of sustainable throughput, of employee retention. I wasn't selling a dream. I was offering a shield. 3 of them, frustrated to the breaking point, agreed in principle to become Aegis's founding clients. The contracts were drafted by a discreet lawyer paid from my personal funds. They were modest in scope but profitable, and they contained a critical, non-negotiable clause. Switching from Vantage Point to Aegis was a permanent move. No going back. Meanwhile, I studied the Mercantile Trust Loan Agreement like a sacred text, buried in the dense legalese of Section 9C. Was the covenant Julian had undoubtedly skimmed? The Material Adverse Change Clause. If Vantage Points revenue from its top 10 clients dropped by more than 25% in a quarter, or if client retention overall fell below 70%. Mercantile had the right to call the entire loan due for immediate repayment. Julian, in his arrogant grab for everything, was about to inherit a financial tripwire, and I held the schematic. My final preparation was with Martin. A week before the signing, I invited him to my home. I showed him the Aegis business plan, the signed letters of intent from the 3 founding clients. "This is where we're going," I said. "This is the future. Vantage Point is the past. Julian is welcome to it." Martin's hands trembled as he paged through the documents. The anxiety on his face melted away, replaced by the fierce focus of an engineer who has just been shown a flawless blueprint. "The loan covenant. You're going to trigger it." "He's going to trigger it," I corrected, "by driving away the clients who are his lifeblood. All we have to do is let him, and be ready to catch him when they jump." Martin looked at me, a new respect dawning in his eyes. "You're not surrendering. You're deploying a strategic retreat to a superior position. I'm letting him claim a castle whose foundations I've already quietly relocated," I said. "Now, can you play your part? Can you look defeated when you hand him the papers?" A rare, grim smile touched Martin's lips. "For this, Clara, I can give an Academy Award-winning performance." The signing was held in a neutral venue, a law firm's conference room, all polished wood and soulless art. Julian arrived with his lawyer, a woman named Genevieve with an immaculate blonde bob and a smile that didn't thaw the ice in her eyes. Martin was with me, a pillar of somber support in his best suit. The document stack was formidable. Julian's version of clean involved 1,000 cuts of legalese, each one transferring an asset, a trademark, a client contract. I was to receive $1 in exchange for my 50% equity stake. The finality of it was breathtaking. "Shall we proceed?" Genevieve asked, her voice crisp. I picked up the expensive pen provided. I could feel Julian's gaze, hot and eager, upon me. He was savoring this, the moment of his unambiguous victory. He saw a woman worn down by loss, outplayed, accepting a merciful exit. I signed the first page. Clara Vance. The ink was dark and permanent, page after page. Transfer of intellectual property. Assignment of client agreements. Lee's assumption. Each signature was a release. I was not signing away my life's work. I was cutting the anchor line from a ship I'd already abandoned for a better vessel. Julian couldn't contain himself. As I neared the end, he spoke, his voice dripping with magnanimous pity. You know, Clara, I truly believe this is for the best. Vantage Point needs a single, clear direction. And you deserve peace. A chance to find something that truly fulfills you. I looked up and gifted him with the smile he expected to see. Tired, grateful, defeated. Thank you, Julian. I hope Vantage Point is everything you dream it will be. The final signature was done. Martin gathered my copies. I stood, my legs steady. Julian stood too, extending his hand across the table. No hard feelings, truly. I took it. His grip was firm, confident, the grip of a man holding a winning lottery ticket. None at all, I said. As I turned to leave, Martin cleared his throat. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table beside the massive contract. My resignation, Mr. Thorne, effective immediately. My transition notes are on the server. Julian blinked, the first crack in his composure. Geneviève's eyes narrowed slightly. But Julian recovered quickly, waving a dismissive hand. Of course, Martin. I understand loyalty. Best of luck to you. We walked out of the room, down the plush hallway, into the elevator. The doors closed, sealing us in silence. Martin let out a long, shuddering breath he seemed to have been holding for weeks. It's done, he said. It's begun, I corrected. Call Sandra, Ben, and Liam. Tell them Aegis is open for business. Their contracts are active today. The first week, nothing happened. Julian, I heard through the dwindling grapevine, was ecstatic. He held a company-wide meeting, announcing a new era of focused, visionary leadership. He hinted at exciting partnerships Kensington, no doubt. The office, he promised, would be getting a much-needed refresh. The second week, the first call came. Sandra at Torrance Manufacturing. Julian took it himself, ready to reassure a valued client. He was not prepared for her polite, unyielding tone. Julian, we're making some strategic changes to our operational partnerships. We'll be concluding our contract with Vantage Point at the end of the month, as per the termination clause. Please direct all final invoices to my department. Sandra, is there a problem? We've had a fantastic relationship for years. The problem, Julian, is that our needs have evolved. We require a more resilient approach. Thank you for your service. She hung up. Julian was irritated, but not alarmed. Clients came and went. The next day, it was Ben from Evergreen. The same script, the same firm politeness. Then Liam from Codecraft, 3 of Vantage Point's top 5 revenue-generating clients, gone within 48 hours. And they weren't just leaving. They were utterly unreceptive to Julian's charm, his offers of discounts, his promises of renewed focus. They had already moved on. Panic, thin and sharp, began to prick at Julian's confidence. He called emergency meetings, demanding his sales team find replacements, ordering his remaining account managers to lock down their clients. But a strange paralysis had infected Vantage Point. Martin's resignation had been a signal to others who were disillusioned. 2 key project leads followed. Rumors swirled about where Sandra, Ben, and Liam had gone, whispers of a new, hyper-competent firm called Aegis. Revenue projections for the quarter were shredded. The debt was no longer a background detail. It was a looming, dark cloud on every financial report. Julian's lawyer, Geneviève, started reviewing the mercantile loan documents with a growing sense of dread. The fatal blow came exactly 30 days after the signing. Julian was in his office, now redecorated with even more masculine, aggressive art, trying to strong-arm a mid-level client into a premature renewal. His private line rang. Julian, it's Robert Peterson at Mercantile Trust. The banker's voice was familiar, but the tone was not. It was cold, formal. Pete, Good to hear from you. Listen, I was meaning to circle back about possibly extending I'm calling about loan number 73409. The Vantage Point commercial expansion note. Peterson cut him off. We've completed our quarterly portfolio review. Your firm has experienced a material adverse change as defined in Section 9C. Client retention is below 50%. Revenue from designated key clients has dropped by over 40. Julian's blood ran cold. Pete, that's a temporary situation. We're in a transition period. We're about to sign a major partnership that will more than compensate. The covenants are not subject to interpretation, Julian, Peterson said, his voice like iron. The full, outstanding principal balance of $3 million is now due and payable. You have 30 days to remit payment in full to Mercantile Trust. The world seemed to tilt. You can't call that loan. We have a history. My personal guarantee is on that. Your personal guarantee was for the previous corporate entity under the previous ownership structure, Peterson said, a hint of grim satisfaction in his voice. Lawyers, it seemed, had been busy on all sides. The restructure and asset transfer triggered a review. The debt is called. 30 days, Julian. After that, we moved to liquidate the collateral, the office leasehold improvements, the furniture, the intellectual property, the client list. Good day. The dial tone was a death knell. Julian sat stunned, the phone slipping from his hand. His eyes swept the office with his view, his empire. The pieces tumbled into place with horrifying clarity. Clara's calm. Martin's resignation, the coordinated departure of the key clients, the mysterious, suddenly competitive Aegis. He hadn't outmaneuvered her. She had orchestrated him. She had given him a bomb painted in gold, and he had hugged it to his chest. He called Genevieve, his voice a ragged whisper. She set a trap. The debt, the clients, it was all a trap. Genevieve, having just pulled up the newly live Aegis Operational Integrity website, went pale. There, under our founder's vision, was a quote about building not just for growth, but for endurance. It was signed by Clara Vance, CEO. She didn't take anything from you, Julian, Genevieve said, her professional detachment crumbling into something like awe. She let you take everything that was about to become worthless. 1 year later, Aegis Operational Integrity operates from a sun-drenched loft in a converted brick factory on the city's creative east side. The space is open, green with plants, and humming with purposeful quiet. Our team is small, carefully chosen for expertise and ethos. Martin, my cue, no longer jumps at unexpected noises. He has the serene air of a man whose spreadsheets finally match reality. We are not the largest firm in the city, but we are the one other firms call when they are in real trouble. Our reputation is for competence, integrity, and results. We are growing, not in explosive, unstable leaps, but with the steady, sure growth of a deep-rooted tree. Vantage Point Consulting ceased operations 9 months ago. Mercantile Trust recovered a fraction of its loan from the auction of office assets. The Vantage Point brand, tainted by the very public collapse, was worthless. Julian Thorne, I am told, does freelance business development work. The industry gossip says he's still charming, but the offers are fewer, and the sheen has dulled. I received a letter from him 6 months after the collapse. It was a scrawl of rage and accusation, blaming me for his ruin. For my treachery, the last line read, "You destroyed everything we built." I read it once, then fed it through the shredder. He was wrong. I hadn't destroyed it. I had simply understood before he did. that what we had built was already rotten at its core. I didn't fight him for the crumbling castle. I used its stones to build a fortress elsewhere. Victory, I learned, is not always about seizing the prize. Sometimes, it is about discerning the true prize from the gilded trap, and having the courage to walk away from the glitter to build something that will last. Julian got everything he asked for, and I got everything that mattered. Of course! As here is the other part of the story, completing the narrative and exploring the aftermath, the consequences, and the new beginning. The collapse of Vantage Point sent tremors through the city's business community. It was a spectacular, rapid implosion that became a cautionary tale, whispered in boardrooms and written up in industry blogs. Visionary firm crashes under weight of debt, client exodus, one headline read. The narrative, expertly shaped by a few discreet background comments from Martin to trusted journalists, solidified Julian Thorne's reckless ambition and detachment from operational. Reality had killed the golden goose. Meanwhile, Aegis didn't just catch the clients who jumped from the burning ship. We became a lifeboat for others who saw the writing on the wall. Mid-level Vantage Point employees, the ones who actually did the work, began quietly sending their resume. I interviewed each one personally, not just for skill, but for temperament. We hired a few, the diligent, the humble, the ones who spoke of sustainable systems with genuine passion, not as a buzzword. Our team grew to 15, then 20. One afternoon, Martin placed a printout on my desk. It was a legal notice. Kensington Partners v. Julian Thorne and defunct Vantage Point entities. I skimmed it. Kensington, the giant Julian had been courting, was suing for breach of a preliminary memorandum of understanding. They claimed they had invested significant time and resources based on representations of Vantage Points, health, and client stability. They wanted their costs back plus damages. Poor Julian, Martin said without a trace of pity. He's not just bankrupt. He's personally liable for that too. The MO had a truth and representation clause he apparently breached with gusto. I felt a distant pang, not for the man he was now, but for the friend he had once been in that garage, dreaming big dreams. That man was long gone, consumed by his own reflection. Send a copy to our legal file, I said, and ensure our own liability shields are impregnable. They're fortress grade, Martin assured me, built on the Vance model of paranoid foresight. Spring turned to summer. Aegis was preparing a major proposal for a municipal contract designing a crisis-resilient framework for the city's public utilities. It was the kind of meaningful, impactful work I had always dreamed of. I was reviewing the final draft late one evening when the receptionist's voice came over the intercom, hesitant. Miss Vance? There's a gentleman here to see you. A Mr. Thorne. He doesn't have an appointment. The air in my office seemed to still. I hadn't spoken to him since the signing. I considered having Martin or security deal with him, but curiosity and perhaps the need for final closure won out. Send him in, Maya, and then you can head home. Thank you. A minute later, Julian stood in my doorway. The change was jarring. The expensive, perfectly tailored suit was gone, replaced by a good butt-off-the-rack jacket that hung slightly loose on him. His famous charisma had eroded, leaving behind a gaunt, haunted intensity. The hazel eyes that once sparkled with schemes were now shadowed and desperate. He didn't wait for an invitation, stepping into the spacious, airy office. His gaze swept over the exposed brick, the living green wall, the collaborative work tables, so different from Vantage Point's cold opulence. Nice, he said, the word brittle. Very. You. Humble, honest, earnest. Can I help you with something, Julian? I remained seated, my voice calm. He flinched at the formality. Help me? A bitter laugh escaped him. You destroyed me, Clara. You orchestrated the whole thing. You gave me a corpse dressed in king's robes. I gave you exactly what you demanded, I replied, folding my hands on the desk. The clients, the brand, the office. You were so eager to believe I was broken. You never stopped to ask why I wasn't fighting. You saw what you wanted to see. You stole my clients. You sabotaged me. He spat, taking a step forward. I didn't steal anyone, I said, my tone sharpening. They left because you stopped providing value. You were so busy being a visionary and plotting your exit, you forgot to do the work that kept the lights on. Sandra, Ben, Liam. They came to me because you stopped listening to them years ago. Aegis was ready because I was already doing the work. Vantage Point was supposed to do. He stared at me, his chest heaving. The rage seemed to drain out of him, leaving a hollow shell of defeat. The bank is going to take my condo. Kensington is suing me for everything I might ever have. I have nothing. The silence stretched. I felt no triumph, only a profound, weary sadness. What do you want from me, Julian? Absolution, a job? The latter was a cruel question, but I needed to hear his answer. He looked away out the window at the city lights starting to twinkle in the dusk. I want you to tell Kensington, to tell them it wasn't all my fault, that the numbers were, that the situation was more complicated. If they dropped the suit, I might be able to breathe. So that was it. Not remorse, not understanding. A plea to clean up his mess one last time. I will not lie for you, Julian, I said quietly. My credibility is the foundation of this company. You made your choices. Every single one of them. From the extravagant office to the Singapore disaster to trying to cut me out of my own company. You chose the debt because you thought it was a trifle. That was your error, not mine. He turned back to me, his eyes blazing with a final spark of the old Julian. You were always like this, so morally superior, so certain your way was the right way. You never understood that business is a game, a theater, and you never understood, I said, standing now, my own voice rising for the first time, that it's not a game. It's people's livelihoods. It's trust. It's building something real. You wanted the theater? Fine, you've got the stage. And then the audience walked out because the play was empty. We stood there, the ghost of our partnership finally exorcised in the space between us. Get out, Julian, I said, my energy spent. Don't come back. He left without another word, a defeated figure swallowed by the empty, creative hallways of my new empire. I sank back into my chair, my heart pounding. It was over, truly over. The municipal contract was ours. It was a landmark victory, putting Aegis on the map as a serious, civic-minded player. We celebrated as a team with pizza and craft beer in the office, a far cry from Vantage Point's champagne-fueled galas. The satisfaction was deeper, shared. A few weeks later, I received a different kind of letter. It was from the Business Ethics Alliance, an organization my father had respected. They were awarding Aegis their annual Integrity in Operations Prize, citing our transparent pricing model, our employee ownership scheme, and our work on the municipal project. The letter specifically mentioned demonstrating that long-term resilience triumphs over short-term gain. I framed the letter and hung it in our small reception area. It was a better trophy than any fastest-growing award Vantage Point had ever won. Martin and I developed a rhythm. He managed the internal machinery with flawless precision, freeing me to focus on client strategy and our company vision. We held weekly equilibrium meetings not just to discuss profit, but to assess team morale, client satisfaction scores, and our environmental footprint. One evening, as we were locking up, Martin paused. For years I had ulcers working for Julian, the constant spinning, the hiding of facts. I thought that was just what business was. He gestured around the peaceful office. This feels like sanity. It is sanity, I said. It's just not always loud enough to be heard over the noise. A year and a half after the signing, I was invited back to my alma mater to give a guest lecture. The professor who invited me taught a class called Sustainable Business Models. I stood at the podium, looking out at the eager, anxious faces of soon-to-be graduates. I didn't show them a skyrocketing growth chart. I showed them a graph of stable, incremental growth. I talked about client retention rates, employee tenure, and the concept of anti-fragility. I told them the story of Aegis, but I framed it as a case study in values. Near the end, a young woman raised her hand. Professor Vance, she began the title. Still gave me a thrill. Your story about the previous company, the partner who took everything and failed. Weren't you bitter? Didn't you want to crush him? The room went quiet. I smiled. That's an excellent question, I said. For a long time, I thought victory was about winning the fight in front of you, about getting what was yours. But I learned that the most powerful victory is choosing your own battlefield. If I had fought him on his terms, in court, with accusations, in a public mudslinging match, I would have expended all my energy, money and spirit on a war over a sinking ship. I would have been bitter, exhausted, and probably lost anyway. I paused, letting it sink in. Instead, I looked at what I truly valued: my expertise, my relationships with the people who did the actual work, my desire to build something lasting and good. I invested everything there. I let him have the hollow prize. So no, I'm not bitter. I'm too busy. And the view from here, I said, meaning not just the lectern but the life I had built, is much better. After the lecture, a few students lingered. The young woman who asked the question approached me. "Thank you," she said. "Everyone else just tells us to be sharks. It's nice to hear there's another way." "There is," I said. "It's just harder. It requires more patience, more courage, and you have to be okay with other people thinking you're losing right up until the moment you win." 5 years later, Aegis Operational Integrity is a recognized leader in its niche. We've expanded to 2 other cities carefully, using the same hub-and-spoke model of deep local integration. We're profitable, stable, and sought after. I'm in my office, now slightly larger but with the same green wall, reviewing a prospect's file. It's a medium-sized family-owned manufacturing firm facing a generational transition. The young CEO, a woman in her 30s, is wary of flashy consultants. My assistant buzzes. "Clara, your 3 p.m. is here." "Miss Thorne." I freeze. "Thorne, it can't be." "Send her in." The woman who enters is sharp, intelligent-eyed, and carries none of Julian's performative charm. She's his niece, I soon learn. Her name is Elena. "I'm not here because of my uncle," she says immediately, as if reading my mind. "In fact, I'm here in spite of him. He's a cautionary tale in our family. I've spent the last 3 years modernizing our operations, but we're hitting a wall with systemic risk. Everyone recommends you. They say you build foundations that don't crack." We talk for an hour. She's the real deal, pragmatic, thoughtful, committed to her employees and her community. We sign a contract. After she leaves, I stand by the window, looking out at the city. The sun is setting, painting the sky in streaks of gold and violet. I think of the garage of my father's library, of the cold glass table in Julian's office. The path here wasn't straight or easy. It was built on quiet strategy, on resilience, on the simple, profound act of building well. Julian wanted everything, and it consumed him. I wanted to build something true, and it set me free. The ledger in the end was silent no more. It spoke in the hum of a thriving office, in the trust of clients, in the sanity of a well-built life. And the sum of its columns was not a figure in a bank account, but a far richer total: integrity, peace, and a legacy that was mine alone.